The morning sun cast long shadows across Maple Ridge, an upscale neighborhood known for its large homes and manicured lawns. At 6:30 a.m., Marcus Jenkins followed his usual jogging route, his feet hitting the pavement in a steady rhythm. 3 times a week for the past year, he ran this same path, waving to the occasional early riser collecting their newspaper. Today felt no different as Marcus checked his watch, a silver Seiko his parents had given him when he finished his master's degree last year. He cherished the timepiece not for its value but for what it represented: years of hard work and his family's pride. He had 15 minutes to finish his run before heading home to shower and get ready for work. As Marcus turned onto Oakwood Drive, he noticed a man in a dark blue uniform watching him from across the street. The man, Ryan Decker, worked as a security officer for the neighborhood association but was currently off duty. Ryan had received a text from a colleague about a theft reported the previous evening, an expensive watch stolen from one of the homes on Birch Lane. Silver watch, male suspect, athletic build, was all the description Ryan had. It wasn't much to go on, but when he spotted Marcus jogging, someone he didn't recognize as a resident, wearing what appeared to be a silver watch, something clicked in his mind. Ryan crossed the street quickly, raising his hand to signal Marcus to stop. "Excuse me, sir, I need to speak with you for a moment." Marcus slowed to a stop, pulling out his earbuds, his breathing slightly heavy from the run. "Is everything okay?" he asked, confused by the stern expression on the security officer's face. "Can I see some ID?" "There was a theft reported in this area last night," Ryan said, his eyes fixed on the watch on Marcus's wrist. "A theft? I don't live in this neighborhood, but I jog through here regularly," Marcus explained, feeling suddenly self-conscious about being stopped. "I don't carry ID when I run, just my house key and phone." Ryan's gaze remained on the watch. "That's an expensive timepiece you're wearing. Mind telling me where you got it?" The implication hit Marcus like a punch to the gut. His confusion quickly turned to disbelief as he realized what was happening. It's a graduation gift from my parents. I've had it for almost a year now." "Interesting coincidence," Ryan replied, his tone making it clear he didn't believe Marcus. "A watch just like that one was reported stolen last night." Two residents walking their dogs slowed down to observe the interaction, their curious eyes moving between Marcus and Ryan. Marcus felt his face grow hot, not from his run, but from the humiliation of being accused in public. "This is ridiculous," Marcus said, his voice rising slightly. "I didn't steal anything. I'm just trying to finish my morning run." Ryan took a step closer. "If you can't provide ID, I'm going to need to call this in. The description matches, and I have a duty to investigate suspicious individuals in the neighborhood." Marcus stood frozen in place, his mind racing. What had started as a normal morning had suddenly turned into a nightmare. How could he prove the watch was his? How could he prove he was just a jogger who happened to be passing through? As more neighbors began to gather, drawn by the escalating voices, Marcus realized that his regular running route, once a source of peace and routine, had become the setting for a confrontation that would change everything. The tension between Marcus and Ryan had drawn a small crowd of onlookers. Some watched with concern, others with suspicion, as the security officer continued to question Marcus about his watch. "Listen, I've explained this already. The watch is mine. It was a gift," Marcus repeated, his patience wearing thin. His morning run, usually a source of calm before work, had turned into a humiliating public ordeal. Ryan shook his head. "It matches the description of stolen property. Until we clear this up, you need to stay right here while I call this in." As Ryan reached for his phone, a woman's voice called out from across the street. "Wait, what's going on here?" The crowd parted as Eleanor Thompson, a 67-year-old retired teacher who had lived in Maple Ridge for over 3 decades, approached with purpose in her steps. Despite her age, she moved with determination, her gray hair pulled back in a neat bun. "Morning, Mrs. Thompson," Ryan nodded respectfully. "Just questioning the suspicious individual about a stolen watch. Nothing to worry about." Eleanor's eyes narrowed as she looked between Ryan and Marcus. Recognition dawned on her face. Suspicious? This young man runs through our neighborhood 3 times a week, rain or shine. I see him from my kitchen window while I'm having my morning coffee. Marcus felt a wave of relief wash over him. "Thank you," he said, gratitude evident in his voice. "I've been running this route for almost a year now. Eleanor turned to Ryan with a firm gaze. What evidence do you have besides a watch that looks similar to one that was reported stolen? Ryan shifted uncomfortably. Well, the description is probably so vague it could match half the joggers in the city. Eleanor interrupted. She turned to the gathered neighbors. How many of you have seen this young man running through our neighborhood before? Several hands went up, including those of the Henderson couple who walked their golden retriever at the same time most mornings, and Mr. Chen, who was often watering his prize roses when Marcus passed by. He always waves, Mr. Chen added. Very polite. The mood of the crowd began to shift. What had started as suspicion was turning to embarrassment as neighbors realized they had been quick to assume the worst. Ryan's face reddened. I was just doing my job. There was a report. Your job is to protect our community, Eleanor said firmly, not harass people based on flimsy assumptions. She turned to Marcus. I'm sorry this happened to you, young man. Marcus nodded, still trying to process the rapid turn of events. Thank you for speaking up. By now, another neighbor had stepped forward. Michael Reeves, president of the neighborhood association. He had been alerted by a text from his wife who had witnessed the confrontation from their front yard. Ryan, Michael said quietly but firmly, I think we need to let this gentleman continue his run. Faced with mounting evidence that Marcus was a regular presence in the neighborhood, Ryan reluctantly backed down. Fine, he muttered, clearly unhappy but outnumbered. But if anything turns up missing. That's enough, Michael cut him off. We'll discuss proper security protocols at next week's meeting. As the crowd began to disperse, Eleanor gently touched Marcus's arm. Are you all right, dear? Marcus took a deep breath, the adrenaline still coursing through his system. I'm okay, thank you for stepping in. I should have done it sooner, Eleanor said regretfully. I recognized you right away. As Marcus prepared to continue his run, several neighbors approached to introduce themselves properly. What had begun as a confrontation was transforming into something unexpected. Genuine connections with people who had seen him countless times but never said hello. Still, as he checked his watch, the watch that had sparked this whole incident, Marcus wondered how many other runners didn't have an Eleanor Thompson to speak up for them. Marcus sat on the edge of his bed that evening, still in his work clothes, staring at the watch on his wrist. The silver Seiko caught the light from his bedside lamp, gleaming innocently. It was just a watch, a meaningful gift, but still just an object. Yet today, it had transformed into something else entirely. Evidence in an accusation that had left him shaken to his core. His phone buzzed again. The third call from his mother in the past hour. Marcus had texted her briefly about the incident, downplaying what happened, but she knew her son well enough to read between the lines. He wasn't ready to talk about it yet, not even with her. The apartment felt unusually quiet. His roommate, Jamal, was working the night shift at the hospital, leaving Marcus alone with his thoughts. He replayed the morning's events for what felt like the 100th time. The security officer's suspicious glare, the gathering crowd, the humiliation of being treated like a criminal for simply existing in a space. 3 times a week for a year, Marcus muttered to himself. 3 times a week I run that same route. He stood up abruptly and walked to the window, looking out at the city lights. Should he change his running route? The thought made him angry. Why should he have to change his routine because of someone else's prejudice? But another part of him, the practical part, whispered that it might be safer, easier. His phone buzzed again, this time with a text from his sister, Tanya. Mom's worried. Call her. Also, you need to report this. This isn't something you just brush off. Marcus sighed. Tanya, always the fighter in the family. A lawyer working for a civil rights organization, she would see this incident through a different lens, as part of a pattern, not just an isolated event. She was right, of course, but reporting it meant reliving it, explaining it, justifying himself again. The doorbell rang, startling him. Through the peephole, he saw Jamal's girlfriend, Aisha, holding what looked like takeout bags. Jamal said you've had a rough day, she explained when he opened the door. He asked me to bring your favorite, spicy noodles from that place on 4th Street. The simple gesture of kindness broke something loose in Marcus. As they sat at the small kitchen table, a whole story poured out of him, not the abbreviated version he'd texted his mother, but every detail, every feeling. You know what the worst part was? Marcus said, pushing noodles around in his container. It wasn't even the security guy. It was all those people just watching, assuming I was guilty of something. Aisha nodded, until that older woman spoke up. Mrs. Thompson, Marcus confirmed. If she hadn't been there, he didn't finish the thought. So what are you going to do? Aisha asked after a moment of silence. Marcus looked down at his watch again. Tanya wants me to file a report. Your sister's right, Aisha said. But that's not what I asked. What are you going to do tomorrow morning? Are you going to run your route? The question hung in the air between them. In some ways, it was the simplest question, just about a morning routine. In other ways, it was about much more. Marcus's phone buzzed again, a text from an unknown number. This is Eleanor Thompson from Maple Ridge. Michael Reeves gave me your number. I wanted to check that you're okay after this morning's unpleasantness. Several neighbors thought we might organize a community run this weekend if you'd be comfortable joining us. No pressure, of course. Marcus stared at the message, something tight in his chest finally loosening slightly. I think, he said slowly to Aisha, showing her the text, I'm going to keep running my route. And maybe this weekend I won't be running alone. The decision felt small but significant. He would call his mother soon. He would talk to Tanya about filing a report. But first, he would finish his noodles, thank Aisha for her kindness, and set his alarm for his regular morning run. News of the confrontation between Marcus and Ryan spread through Maple Ridge like wildfire. By evening, the story had traveled from neighbor to neighbor, each retelling adding new details and perspectives. What happened on Oakwood Drive that morning had touched a nerve in the community, forcing residents to examine the unspoken assumptions that guided their daily interactions. Eleanor Thompson's living room had never hosted so many visitors. As the person who had intervened, she found herself at the center of the community's response. 6 neighbors crowded onto her floral sofa and borrowed dining chairs, voices overlapping as they discussed the incident. I was there, said Peter Dawson, a retired accountant who lived 3 doors down. I didn't say anything. Just watched. I keep thinking about that. Why didn't I speak up? Because Ryan's supposed to be the authority, replied Sarah Kim, a young mother who had moved to the neighborhood just last year. We're conditioned to trust uniforms. Eleanor passed around a plate of lemon squares. Trust is important, but so is accountability. Ryan jumped to conclusions based on very little evidence. Across the neighborhood, a different conversation was taking place in the basement recreation room of Michael Reeves, the neighborhood association president. The emergency board meeting had drawn 12 people, including 2 security officers from the same company that employed Ryan. This incident reflects poorly on all of us, Michael said, pacing in front of the pool table. We need to address not just Ryan's actions but our entire security approach. Lisa Chen, the association treasurer, nodded in agreement. My husband told me he's seen that young man, Marcus, running through the neighborhood for months. If our security team doesn't even recognize regular visitors, what are we paying them for? One of the security officers, James Wilson, shifted uncomfortably in his seat. With all due respect, we patrol different shifts. We can't know everyone who passes through. Then perhaps we need a better system than see someone you don't recognize, assume they're suspicious, Michael replied firmly. Meanwhile, at the local coffee shop just outside Maple Ridge, a third conversation was unfolding. Tanya Jenkins had driven 2 hours after work to meet her brother in person. Marcus sat across from her, turning his coffee cup in circles without drinking. The neighborhood association president called me, Marcus said. They want me to attend some community forum next week about what happened. Tanya leaned forward. Good, they should hear directly from you. But Marcus, this isn't just about education, it's about accountability. Have they suspended that security officer? I don't know, Marcus admitted. They're investigating, whatever that means. Not enough, Tanya said decisively. I've drafted a formal complaint. She slid a folder across the table. Marcus stared at it without opening it. Is this really necessary? They seem like they're trying to make things right. This isn't just about Maple Ridge, Tanya replied. It's about making sure there's a record. It's about the next person who might not have someone speak up for them. As these conversations continued throughout the evening, Elena Vasquez, a sociology professor who lived on the corner of Maple and Pine, created a private social media group titled Maple Ridge, Building an Inclusive Community. Within hours, 38 neighbors had joined. Her first post was simple: what happened this morning was a symptom, not an isolated incident. If we want to be the community we claim to be, we need honest conversations about bias, security, and belonging. Who's willing to do that work? The responses poured in, some uncomfortable, some defensive, many thoughtful. By midnight, plans had formed for a community dialogue series, a review of security protocols, and the weekend community run that Eleanor had suggested to Marcus. In less than 24 hours, a single confrontation had rippled outward, disturbing the comfortable surface of neighborhood life and revealing the currents flowing beneath. The question now was whether these ripples would fade or become the beginning of real change. Ryan Decker sat in a small conference room at the headquarters of Summit Security Services, his uniform collar feeling unusually tight. Across the table, Diane Rodriguez, the company's operations manager, reviewed the incident report on her tablet, her expression unreadable. So you confronted this individual based solely on the fact that he was wearing a silver watch and you didn't recognize him as a resident? Diane finally asked, looking up. The description matched. Ryan insisted, though his voice lacked conviction. Silver watch, athletic build. It was a reasonable suspicion. Diane set down her tablet. Ryan, we've received 4 formal complaints about the incident. The neighborhood association is threatening to cancel our contract, which accounts for 15% of our annual revenue. Ryan's stomach tightened. I was doing my job. Your job is to observe and report. You were off duty and escalated a situation without proper cause. Diane slid a folder across the table. This is our updated protocol for suspicious person identification. You'll need to complete retraining before returning to active duty. Retraining? Ryan's face flushed. I've been with this company for 6 years. And in those 6 years, you've had 3 similar complaints. This time there were witnesses, including the president of the neighborhood association. Diane's tone softened slightly. This isn't a punishment, Ryan. It's an opportunity to learn. Across town at City Hall, Marcus and Tanya Jenkins sat in a different meeting room with Kevin Patel, Civilian Oversight Coordinator for Local Security Services. The office was cramped but tidy, with certification plaques covering one wall. We take these complaints seriously, Kevin assured them, reviewing the documents Tanya had prepared. Private security officers don't have the same authority as police, but they still need to follow proper procedures. What exactly does that mean in terms of consequences? Tanya asked, her lawyer instincts kicking in. Summit Security will handle their employee internally, but we can add this incident to their company record, which becomes part of their contract renewal review. Kevin explained. More immediately, we can require bias awareness training for all security personnel operating in residential areas. Marcus, who had been quiet until now, finally spoke. I don't want Ryan to lose his job. I want him to understand why what he did was wrong. Kevin nodded. That's a generous perspective. Would you be willing to participate in our community mediation program? It can be more effective than punitive measures alone. Meanwhile, at Maple Ridge Community Center, Eleanor Thompson and Michael Reeves presented their findings to the Neighborhood Association's full board. The conference room was packed, with additional chairs brought in from adjacent rooms. Our security protocols need complete revision, Michael concluded after outlining the incident. We drafted new guidelines that focus on actual suspicious behavior rather than subjective judgments about who belongs in our community. Eleanor stepped forward. Additionally, we've scheduled our first community dialogue session for next Thursday evening. Professor Vasquez has agreed to facilitate a discussion about implicit bias and community safety. Board member James Wilson raised his hand. These are good steps, but shouldn't we wait until the security company completes their investigation before making changes? No, Eleanor said firmly. This isn't just about one security officer's actions. It's about our responsibility as a community. How many joggers, delivery people, or visitors have felt unwelcome or been questioned inappropriately without us knowing? As the meeting continued, Marcus received a text from Michael with an update and a question. Would he be willing to meet with Ryan in a mediated setting? Marcus stared at his phone for a long moment. Part of him wanted to put this entire incident behind him. Another part recognized that real change might require uncomfortable conversations. After consulting with Tanya, he typed his response. Yes, but only if he's willing to truly listen. In 3 separate locations, the process of accountability had begun, not simply through punishment or policies, but through the harder work of confronting assumptions, changing systems, and opening dialogue about who belongs and who decides. The community center's small meeting room felt both too large and too intimate. Marcus sat on one side of a round table, his sister Tanya beside him for support. Across from them, Ryan Decker kept his eyes fixed on his folded hands, his security uniform replaced by a button-down shirt and slacks. Between them sat Amara Wilson, a professional mediator with 15 years of experience navigating difficult conversations. Her calm presence somehow made the room feel safer, though tension still hung in the air like a physical thing. "Thank you both for agreeing to this meeting," Amara began, her voice measured and warm. "This is not about assigning blame, but about understanding perspectives and finding a path forward. Marcus, would you be willing to share how the incident affected you?" Marcus took a deep breath. He had rehearsed what he wanted to say, but now that the moment had arrived, words felt inadequate. "Before that morning, running was my escape," he finally said. "It was the one time of day when I didn't have to think about how others might perceive me. Now," he paused, collecting his thoughts. "Now I'm conscious of how I look when I run. I check my watch and wonder if it seems too expensive. I notice who's watching me from their windows." Ryan shifted in his seat but remained silent. "The worst part wasn't even the accusation," Marcus continued. "It was feeling like I needed to prove my innocence for simply existing in a space." Amara nodded. "Thank you for sharing that, Marcus. Ryan, can you tell us what was going through your mind that morning?" Ryan cleared his throat. "I thought I was doing my job," he said, his voice quieter than Marcus had remembered it. "We had a report about a stolen watch. You matched what I thought was the description." He finally looked up at Marcus. "But I've been thinking about why I was so quick to suspect you." For the first time, Marcus saw uncertainty in Ryan's eyes. "In the training sessions I've had to take," Ryan continued, "they talked about something called confirmation bias, seeing what you expect to see. I think maybe that's what happened." Tanya leaned forward. "That's putting it mildly. You saw a black man in an upscale neighborhood and jumped to conclusions." Ryan flinched. "I'd like to think it wasn't about race, but—" "Maybe you should sit with that discomfort instead of dismissing it," Tanya interrupted. Amara gently redirected the conversation. "Let's try to stay with I statements. Ryan, what have you learned from this experience?" Ryan was quiet for a moment. "I've learned that good intentions aren't enough. I thought I was protecting the neighborhood, but I was really just acting on assumptions." He looked directly at Marcus. "I'm sorry. Not just because I got in trouble, but because I caused real harm." The apology hung in the air between them. Marcus nodded, but didn't immediately respond. "What would meaningful amends look like to you, Marcus?" Amara asked. Marcus considered the question. "I don't need anything from Ryan personally. What I want is for this not to happen to someone else. I want actual change." "I've been helping rewrite our security protocols," Ryan offered. "And I've asked to lead a training session for the other officers based on what I've learned." The conversation continued for nearly 2 hours, moving from the specific incident to broader issues. There were moments of tension and disagreement, but also flashes of genuine understanding. As they prepared to leave, Ryan hesitantly extended his hand to Marcus. "I can't undo what happened, but I want you to know I'm committed to doing better." Marcus looked at the offered hand for a long moment before accepting it with a firm grip. It wasn't forgiveness exactly. That might come later, or it might not. It was something more complicated, an acknowledgement that both men were part of the same community, whether they had chosen it or not, and that moving forward would require effort from both sides. "Actions matter more than words," Marcus said simply. Ryan nodded. "I understand." The Maple Ridge Community Center's main hall buzzed with conversation as residents filed in and found seats. 4 months had passed since the confrontation between Marcus and Ryan, and tonight marked the culmination of changes that had rippled through the neighborhood. Marcus stood near the back of the room, observing the diverse crowd. He recognized many faces now, not just Eleanor Thompson and Michael Reeves, but dozens of residents he had met during community runs, dialogue sessions, and neighborhood gatherings. His regular jogging route remained unchanged, but the experience of running it had transformed completely. Nervous? Eleanor asked, appearing beside him with a supportive smile. A little, Marcus admitted. Public speaking isn't exactly my strength. Just speak from the heart, she advised, patting his arm. That's all anyone can ask. Michael approached the podium, and the room gradually quieted. Thank you all for coming tonight. 6 months ago, we began a journey as a community, not because we wanted to, but because we needed to. What happened between Ryan Decker and Marcus Jenkins forced us to examine uncomfortable truths about safety, belonging, and the assumptions we make about who fits in our neighborhood. From his position at the side of the stage, Ryan nodded solemnly. He was dressed in his security uniform, but with a new patch on the sleeve that read Community Liaison Officer, position created as part of the security company's reformed approach. Tonight, we're here to formally adopt our new community safety charter, Michael continued. But first, I'd like to invite Marcus Jenkins to share his perspective on the journey we've taken together. As Marcus made his way to the podium, he felt a curious sense of calm. The nervousness remained, but something stronger had taken root alongside it, a sense of purpose. Good evening, he began, looking out at the attentive faces. When I was first asked to speak tonight, I wasn't sure what to say. The easy narrative would be that something bad happened. We all learned an important lesson, and now everything is fixed. He paused, collecting his thoughts. The truth is more complicated. What happened to me that morning wasn't unique or unusual. What was unusual was the response. A community that chose to listen, reflect, and change instead of becoming defensive or dismissive. Marcus gestured toward the back of the room, where Tanya sat with their parents, who had driven in for the occasion. My sister, who's an attorney, tells me that systems don't change because of single incidents. They change when people decide an incident matters enough to examine the underlying patterns. He turned a page in his notes. In the past 4 months, Maple Ridge has revised its security protocols, established a resident advisory board that includes renters and homeowners, created a welcome program for new community members, and launched a series of ongoing conversations about what safety really means. These aren't small changes. Ryan stepped forward when Marcus invited him to share the stage. The two men stood side by side, not quite friends, but no longer adversaries. Ryan and I meet regularly now as part of the Community Liaison Program, Marcus explained. Our conversations aren't always easy, but they're always honest. And that's the foundation of real safety, not assumptions or suspicion, but knowledge and connection. As the formal presentation of the new charter began, Marcus returned to his seat beside Eleanor. The document outlined new guidelines for security practices, visitor policies, and community engagement. Practical changes sparked by a single confrontation. You should be proud, Eleanor whispered. This wouldn't have happened without you. Marcus shook his head slightly. It wouldn't have happened without all of us. One person can start a conversation, but it takes a community to change. As the meeting concluded and people gathered in small groups to discuss implementation plans, Marcus glanced down at his watch, the silver Seiko that had inadvertently started it all. It still marked the time faithfully, but now it carried additional meaning, a reminder that small moments can lead to significant change when people choose to learn and grow together. In Maple Ridge, that process had just begun. The tension between Marcus and Ryan escalated quickly. Several more neighbors had stopped to watch the confrontation, their morning routines interrupted by the unusual scene unfolding on their normally quiet street. Look, Marcus said, trying to keep his voice steady, I've had this watch for nearly a year. It was a graduation gift from my parents when I finished my master's degree. I can show you pictures of me wearing it from months ago if you give me a second to pull them up on my phone. Ryan crossed his arms, unmoved by Marcus's explanation. Anyone could have photos. That doesn't prove when you got it. A middle-aged woman walking her small terrier slowed her pace to listen. An elderly man retrieving his newspaper paused on his driveway. Two teenage girls waiting for the school bus whispered to each other, phones raised slightly as if ready to record if things escalated further. This is ridiculous, Marcus said, frustration rising in his voice. You can't just stop random people and accuse them of theft with no evidence. I have evidence, Ryan insisted, pointing to the watch. Silver watch, just like the one reported stolen. and you can't provide ID or proof of ownership. Because I'm jogging. Who carries their watch receipt while exercising? Marcus felt his heart pounding, but not from physical exertion. The growing audience made him increasingly uncomfortable. Every pair of eyes felt like a judgment. Ryan pulled out his phone. I'm calling this in. You'll need to wait here until we sort this out. Call what in? You're a neighborhood security guard, not the police, Marcus said, suddenly aware of how little authority Ryan actually had. You can't detain me. Actually, I can perform a citizen's arrest if I have reasonable suspicion of theft, Ryan replied, though he sounded less certain than before. A woman pushing a stroller approached the growing circle of onlookers. What's happening? She asked another neighbor. Security thinks that Jogger stole a watch, the neighbor replied, just loud enough for Marcus to hear. The casual way the accusation spread through the crowd made Marcus's stomach twist. No one was asking questions or challenging Ryan's assumption. In their eyes, he had already transformed from a jogger into a suspect. This is my watch, Marcus stated firmly, trying to control the tremor in his voice. I've been running this route 3 mornings a week for the past year. Has anyone ever reported anything stolen during that time? Has anyone ever had a problem with me being here? Ryan ignored the questions. The report came in last night. Silver watch, similar style. The timing fits. The timing fits. Marcus repeated in disbelief. So anyone wearing a silver watch this morning is automatically suspicious? How many people in this neighborhood do you think own silver watches? A few uncomfortable glances were exchanged among the spectators, but no one spoke up. Marcus took a deep breath, trying a different approach. Listen, I work at Westside Medical Center as a lab technician. My shift starts in an hour. I'm just trying to finish my run and get to work. You can call the hospital if you want to verify my employment. Ryan hesitated, the mention of Marcus's workplace introducing a complication to his narrative. That doesn't prove anything about the watch. What would prove it, then? Marcus asked, exasperation clear in his voice. What would convince you that I didn't steal this watch? The question hung in the air. Around them, the neighbors watched the standoff with varying expressions: curiosity, discomfort, suspicion. No one stepped forward to help or intervene. The silence of the onlookers felt to Marcus almost as accusatory as Ryan's words. In that moment, Marcus realized he wasn't just fighting Ryan's accusation. He was fighting the silent assumptions of everyone watching, assumptions that made it easier to believe he was a thief than a regular jogger who happened to own a nice watch. As Ryan began speaking into his phone, describing the situation to someone on the other end, Marcus felt a heaviness settle over him that had nothing to do with physical exhaustion and everything to do with the weight of proving his innocence for simply existing in a space where others thought he didn't belong.